Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be back. In fact, the book, Radical Candor, was named at this very conference. I used to call it Tough Love, which doesn't fall so trippingly off the tongue. And then I gave a talk at this conference, and thanks to feedback from you all and also from Dan Pink, the book became Radical Candor. So feedback at this conference has been very valuable to me. Last year and the year before, I talked about radical candor and giving feedback and why it's so important when giving feedback to care personally and challenge directly. What I want to talk about today is why it's so important to care personally and challenge directly in the way that you build your team. It's even more important in the way you build your team. When you give feedback, you're going to impact people's feelings, and that matters a lot. When you build your team and when you decide who gets what role and who doesn't, who gets a promotion and who doesn't, who's going to work on this project and who's not, you're not just impacting people's feelings, you're impacting their wallet often and their ability to achieve their dreams. So it's really important to get this right. For a long time, I thought that I was kind of the world's leading expert in how to build a great team. I was very lucky. I'd been able to build an amazing team at a startup I did. That's where Jared Smith and I started working together. And then when I joined Google, a lot of that team went with me to Google, and I felt very proud of that and very lucky to be able to work with these people. And I had a reputation as somebody who knew how to build a great team at Google. And then I went to Apple, and somebody said something to me that taught me that I had been making a giant mistake in the way that I built teams for my entire career. I had been systematically undervaluing the contributions of some of the most important people on my teams throughout my whole career. So what did this executive at Apple tell me? This executive at Apple told me that in order to build a truly great team in which everyone can take a step in the direction of their dreams and you can achieve great results, you have to understand what the superstars want versus what the rock stars want. Superstars and rock stars. What in the world is the difference between a superstar and a rock star? I didn't understand at all what she meant. What she explained to me is that the superstars on your team, these are the people who you think of as musicians. Like, these are the people who are going to create change on your team. These are the people who want new challenges all the time, who, if they are still in the same job in a couple of years, are going to be bored to tears, right? Who then are the rock stars? She said, don't think of your rock stars like famous musicians. Think of your rock stars like the Rock of Gibraltar, right? Think of your rock stars as the people who are great at their job and happy to keep doing it, right? You don't need to give them the next new job. These are not the people who want your job or your boss's job. These are not the people who want to be Steve Jobs. These are the people who simply love their work and want to keep doing it. And if you don't screw it up for them, they'll often keep doing it for years. They will be the source of stability on your team, right? And that really made me think. It got me to thinking about a guy in particular who used to work for me. His name was Derek. And he led customer support at a startup where I worked back in the 1990s. And Derek was awesome at his job. He had great empathy for the customers, and the customers loved him. Forget about NPS score. The customers would send him baked goods, right? We would get babkas and latkes. Like, that's how you know you're doing things good, is when your customers are sending your customer service guy baked goods. So Derek was a rock star. When the company started growing, thanks in part to Derek's work, we needed to build a team. And so I asked Derek, do you want to lead this team? And the company was in New York, and Derek said to me, no, I don't want to lead the team, because what I really want to do in life is be a Broadway star. And so what I really want is to be able to leave work every day, predictably at 5 o'clock, so I can go be in these off-Broadway shows. And I'm ashamed to admit it now, but I kind of wrote Derek off at that moment. I was like, he's not ambitious. And I hired somebody else to lead customer service. And the person I hired was super ambitious, right? And what he really wanted to be was not the head of customer support. He wanted to be the CEO of the company. So I was like, that's how you build a high-performing team, right? You have all people who want your boss's job. And sure enough, he started making decisions. He sort of, this guy that I hired, we'll call him Josh. So Josh sort of believed that customer support work was so boring you had to hire B players to do it, right? How do you think that made Derek feel? Derek came charging into my office complaining about, he had this whole thing around Ayn Rand and the fountainhead, and there are these architects in the world, and they're going to change the world, but you also need to turn the lights on in a building, and if you want to turn the lights on, you need an A+ electrician to work on the building. You don't need a C- architect or a B+ architect or whatever. You need an A+ electrician. And this kind of made sense to me, but after all, Derek wasn't signing up to lead the team, Josh was. So I let Josh do it his way. And sure enough, Derek got frustrated and quit. The babkas stopped coming, the latkes stopped coming, no more baked goods. And pretty soon it was reflected in the revenue. So the way that I treated Derek by not sufficiently respecting his rock stardom hurt not only Derek, it hurt the whole team, hurt the company. And that made me realize, sort of, once I had this new framing of superstars and rock stars, it made me realize that the way that we do talent planning on our teams is often just dead wrong, right? So, I mean, not totally wrong. We need to understand performance, right? Bad to excellent. But we also need to understand growth trajectory. Too often on the vertical axis, what we do is, instead of using growth trajectory, what the word we use is potential, right? And if you use the word potential, you're doing a few things that are really wrong. First of all, you're assigning people as low potential, right? I don't believe there's any such thing as a low potential human being. That is really bad. And the second thing you're doing is you wind up not understanding the difference between the superstars and the rock stars. You wind up undervaluing your rock stars, if that's the word you use. So instead, I would encourage you to think about your team in terms of who's on a steep growth trajectory and who's on a gradual growth trajectory. And unlike most 2x2s, there's nothing bad or good about being on a steep growth trajectory or a gradual growth trajectory. They're just different, right? They're just different. They're different phases of your career. And furthermore, all of us during our careers wind up at some point on a steep growth trajectory phase and then a gradual growth trajectory phase. So think of these as phases that we all go through. Also on your team, there's always going to be a bunch of people who are doing good but not great work, and I'll talk about how to manage those later. There's going to be some people on your team who ought to be doing great, who are sort of on a steep growth trajectory in their lives, but for some reason they're performing badly. And this is what I call the look yourself in the mirror quadrant. This is where your actions as a leader may be causing somebody else to be performing badly. And then, of course, there are the people on your team who are not good at the job and not getting any better, right? And these are the people who you should probably be managing out, but you're probably not being honest enough with yourself or with them. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So that's sort of a simple framework that I would propose to you to think about how to build a great team. Understand who's in a steep growth trajectory phase, who's in a gradual growth trajectory phase, and then analyze it from there. Now, rather than spending too much time in this abstract framework, what I want to do is jump into some specific things you can do, right? But remember, as we go through these specific things you can do, that none of these, don't write people's names in boxes and leave them there. These are all phases. You should be changing this up all the time. We go through different phases of our life. So let's think about some tools and techniques that you can use to put this idea into place. There's going to be 4 things I'm going to talk about. A growth management process, how to be a thought partner to the people on your team, how to make sure that you're giving fair ratings to everybody, because we systematically give our rock stars ratings that aren't as good as we should, and how to have career conversations. Make sense? Let's start with a growth management process. This is not your grandfather's talent planning system that I want to propose, right? This is something different. So remember, don't write names in boxes, right? These are not permanent markers. But you're going to, every quarter, maybe twice a year, you're going to think about who is in what phase on your team, right? You want to do this process relatively regularly, right? You want to calibrate the process. These are not your own subjective judgments. Get the opinions of others. You want to come up with some clear actions for each person on your team. How are you going to help them grow, not in the way that you want to grow in your career, but in the way that they want to grow in their career? How are you going to understand what gives their work meaning? Your job is not to provide purpose, but your job is to understand and facilitate meaning in work, right? And you don't want to do this during a performance review. This is something that you do to help people grow appropriately on your team, right? So this is a process that I suggest you do routinely, at least once a year. Okay, so let's start with what are the specific things you want to do for the superstars on your team. And I want to start with a story here. Shortly after I joined Google, I was talking to Larry Page who's one of the founders and now the CEO of Google, about a summer job that he had that had an enormous influence on how he wanted to lead Google. He said that his boss explained the assignment that he was going to have for the summer and told him that he thought this would take him about 12 weeks, and here's how to do it. And Larry thought about the problem, and he came up with a different approach that would probably take him like 2 minutes, and he would finish the whole problem. Or maybe it was 2 days, but it was a lot less than 12 weeks. And his boss sort of said, no, 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 no. That'll make us all look bad if you do it that way. I want you to do it the way we've always done it. Don't experiment. And this was a source of enormous frustration. It was like getting stuck in traffic for 12 weeks for Larry. He hated his life for those 12 weeks. And I'll never forget the way he looked at me, and he really meant it. He said, I never want anyone at Google to feel like that, ever. Because there are managers out there, and we've all been this manager, and we've all had this manager, whose instinct is to clip the wings of the superstars. That's the worst thing you can do for people who are on a really steep growth trajectory. Your obligation to the people on your team who really have particular ambitions for growth is to help them spread their wings, right? So you want to give them new challenges. You want to make sure that you don't squash them, that you don't clip their wings, that you give them room and freedom to experiment. You want to define a path for increased responsibility. It doesn't necessarily have to be a promotion, but they need to see a path forward to growth. It's a really great idea to assign a coach, even if you can't pay for a coach. If you can find someone who's a few years ahead of this person or who knows something that this person doesn't know but wants to know, it will help you give their work meaning, because they're growing, they're learning something. You also want to identify this person's successor, because this person is probably not going to be on your team forever. Don't try to trap them. You're lucky while you have these superstars. Sometimes I used to think of these superstars as shooting stars, because they weren't going to be around for long, but wow, they were beautiful while I could see them, right? And so just go with that. Like, just make sure that you know who their successor is going to be and that it's okay. And whatever you do, don't manage or track these people. Often it's tempting to conflate management with growth. Management is one way to grow, but there's an awful lot of people who want to grow in other ways. One of the great things about being an engineer at Google is that you can continue to grow in your career forever, but you never have to become a manager. You can deepen your skills, right? So don't conflate management and growth. There's a lot of different ways to grow, and you want people to deepen their expertise. So that's sort of in short. There's a lot more to say about this, but luckily you all have the book, so you can read it. That's in short a great way to think about managing your superstars. Now, let's think about the people who shouldn't get the next promotion, who don't, either because they're not ready for it or because they don't want it, right? Now, often people feel like I'm saying something that is profoundly wrong or upsetting when I say you shouldn't promote your rock stars. Don't promote your rock stars. Why wouldn't you promote someone who's great at their job? There's several different reasons. Sometimes people are in a phase of their life where they don't want a promotion. I had a friend who had structured his career very carefully so that when he had his first child, he knew his job inside and out, and he'd be able to get home and spend time with his new family. And 2 months after his first child was born, his boss came to him, "Great news, you're getting a promotion." And the guy was like, "But I don't want a promotion. I have this whole plan in place." And his boss said, "Well, you have to take it. There's no choice." And the guy quit. Like, what a waste for both the guy and for his boss. So sometimes people really don't want that promotion. There's another story about T.S. Eliot, who before he could make his money as an editor, was a clerk at Lloyd's of London. And his boss sort of arrogantly said, "I see no reason why in time, mind you, Eliot might not be an assistant branch manager." Like, he wanted to write poetry for which he would eventually win the Nobel Prize. He did not care about being promoted to assistant branch manager. So don't imagine that your promotion is the be-all and end-all for people. Sometimes they have other things going on in their life that are more important to them than that promotion, but they're still great at their job, right? There's also, how many people have read The Peter Principle? Show of hands. If you haven't read this book, go out and get it. It's an old book, but it's a great one. And the idea of the Peter Principle is that all too often in life, people get promoted to their highest level of incompetence, right? So don't do that to people. Sometimes they've found their groove. They're great at that job. They'll be terrible at the next one. You're not really doing them any favors to promote them beyond their competence. So don't promote your rock stars. Don't create, though, promotion obsession on your team. If the only way to get recognized and rewarded and paid is to get a promotion, then you're going to systematically undervalue your rock stars. So make sure that there's not tons of... A promotion to a new job is a new job, and it comes with all kinds of extrinsic rewards, like usually more salary, more stock. Don't turn it into this huge public hoopla. Make sure that your bonuses and your performance ratings are fair. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute, why they may not be. Offer your rock stars guru status. If there's going to be status on your team, make it around expertise, not around hierarchy, because it's expertise that's going to drive you forward and help people do the greatest work of their lives. And finally, offer them respect. All too often, there are bosses who are the opposite of Larry's boss, who do not what Larry's boss did and clip the wings of their superstars, but who fail to respect the contributions of their rock stars. This is what I did to Derek, and that was bad not only for Derek and the team, it was also really bad for me, because at a certain point in my life, I was the one who was no longer on the steep growth trajectory by choice. This happened, and I didn't fully know how to cope with myself because I hadn't fully respected the rock stars on my team. So this happened to me when I was in the following situation. I was short, still am, old, haven't gotten any younger, and pregnant with twins. No longer pregnant with twins. They're about to turn 8. So short, old, pregnant with twins. Very high risk pregnancy that I was embarking into. And right at this moment, a board member from Twitter came into my office at Google and said, would I be interested in throwing my hat in the ring to become the next CEO of Twitter? Now, a year before that, I would have cut off my left arm to throw my hat in that ring, right? But now I wasn't so sure I could do that job. And I called my doctor and I asked her what she thought. I said, what do you think about taking this job? And she said, oh, well, what's more important to you, that job or the hearts and lungs of your children? Really easy question to answer, right? So I was like, I'll stay at Google. And it turned out like Google, if you have a high-risk pregnancy, get a job at Google. It was the perfect place. Google has prenatal massages. There was like 1 floor up. There was healthy snacks at every stop. And I carried the twins to term. So thank you, Google. Now, before you think that my doctor was sort of an anti-feminist, I just want to pause for a moment and say there are plenty of women who can be pregnant with twins and not miss a beat. So here's a picture of Margaret Thatcher on the day she had her twins, not the day after. The day she had her twins, right? So I don't want this to be just discouraging to every woman who ever has twins. Like, you can do it if you want to. That, however, is not the situation I found myself in. Here is the situation that I found myself in, right? How's that for radical candor? I got to move right past that photo, though. It's a little painful to look back on that photo. So it wasn't the right time for me to be the CEO. We'll just leave it at that. That's why I didn't want to be there. That was about 3 days before I had the twins. So the really nice thing about this story is that sometimes things just all work out. It was really not only good for my team that I stayed at Google and went out on bed rest for 5 months, because it gave them opportunities that they would never have gotten, opportunities to lead that they would never have gotten if I had not stayed around and been out on bed rest. So that was good for them. It was also really good for Google because they stepped up and they did better than I could have done, right? But it was also good for me because it was during bed rest that I realized that the thing that I most care about in my career was not cost per click, but it was this management stuff that I'm up here talking to you about. So it was really great. And if I had respected Derek earlier in my career, I would have come to this without nearly as much angst as I had at the time. Because for a long time, even after that, even though I was really glad that I had carried the twins to term and very happy about the decision I had made, it still took me several years to understand how good it had been for me in my career to have some time in a gradual growth trajectory moment in my career. So make sure that you offer respect to your rock stars. Now, let's talk for a moment about the people who are doing good work, but not great work. I want to assert that there's no such thing as a B player. A manager who allows someone to coast forever doing good but not great work is not doing that person any favors. So what do you do with these people? How do you push them towards excellent performance? Because everybody deserves to do excellent work in their life. There are few pleasures that are greater than doing work that is really great. And everybody deserves that chance, and it's part of your job as a leader to give them that chance. One of the things that you can do is you can give them radically candid feedback. You can show them exactly what they can do to continue to get better. Another thing that you can do is education or training. I like the word education better because usually it's inside of people. Education means, the Latin root I think is educo or something. It means to pull it out of them. It's in there, it's in them. Training you kind of shove down their throats. So pull out of them what is greatest. Give them stretch projects. Give them the opportunity to soar, but also allow them to take a risk to fail. Give them some stretch projects. And if things don't get better, if they never show signs of being able to do excellent work, you're gonna have to have some of the hardest conversations that you'll ever have as a manager. It's really hard to fire people, but sometimes it's even harder to tell people that are doing okay but not great that that's not okay, right? You don't want to push them instantly to be great. You want to give them a chance to succeed. Again, as I say, everybody deserves a chance to do A+ work. Don't ever write anybody off as a B player. Now, what about those people on your team who are in a phase where you know they are capable of great growth, you know they're capable of doing better, but for some reason they're not doing well? This is what I call the boss look yourself in the mirror quadrant. These are the moments when what you're doing as a manager may be having an impact on the people, may be responsible for their bad work. One of the reasons may be that you've put this person in the wrong role. I had somebody who worked for me once who was one of the best people leaders ever. Like an amazing leader of a team, very charismatic, very caring, helped people grow. And I gave this woman a new job that was super analytical with a tiny little team. And the first quarter I gave the worst performance rating this person had ever got. The next quarter it wasn't getting any better. I was giving a lot of feedback. And finally I understood that the problem was not that this person was doing bad work, but that I had put her in the wrong role. Luckily, there was another meaty challenge, big people challenge, leading a giant team that needed a turnaround. I put her on that, and she became, again, one of the best players. So in that case, her bad performance was really my fault, but she was such a sort of team player, she never said that. I had to figure that out, right? Other times, you give people too much too fast. I see this happen all the time, where I'm coaching somebody who's a great manager who thinks that other people can do exactly the same amazing things that they themselves have done. That's not always true, right? It's not arrogant to say maybe you need to go a little bit slower. So don't dump too much too fast on people. Maybe you haven't set expectations clearly enough. Maybe they don't understand exactly what the job is. Maybe you haven't given feedback. Maybe you haven't given clear enough feedback about the work being not nearly good enough. Maybe this person just needs a new manager. There really are times when people just don't get along. And if you don't like your boss, may not mean that your boss is a terrible person, may not mean that you're a terrible person, but it is really hard to thrive in your job if you don't like your boss. And I think we need to make more accommodation for that. Like maybe it's just a bad fit between a person and their manager. Maybe there's a temporary issue. If somebody is having a temporary problem at home, there's an illness in the family or something, just give people a break. But don't depend on them to do what they can't do for that. Like you've got a backstop for them. So that's the boss look yourself in the mirror quadrant, right? Is it a bad fit? Sometimes there's a cultural issue between the person and either the team or the company. It doesn't always mean that the person is problematic, and it doesn't always mean that the culture is problematic. Sometimes it's just legitimately a bad cultural fit with the team. So address that honestly and help the person find a place where there's a good fit. Now, what about these people? What about these people who are not doing well and not getting better? You know what the answer is. And yet, whenever I have taught management classes and I've asked people, okay, what phase is everybody on your team in? And then I'll look around and nobody's put any names in the low performance, in the not doing well and not getting better box. Nobody in the whole class. And then I'll ask a question. How many of you think that there are people at this company who are bad at their jobs and will never get better at it? Everybody raises their hand. But none of them are on any of your, it can't be, that can't be. It's really hard, and it's not a bad thing. It's because you care about your people that you don't want to see this. But it is not it's not nice to ignore low performance. One of the things that I have found that's helped me more than anything else to admit this when we're at this situation is to think back on jobs that I've done that I was terrible at. So for example, once I was a bank teller in between 2 years in college. And I don't add well in my head, and I subtract even worse in my head. And therefore, I gave away a lot of the bank's money that summer because the errors always got caught in one direction and rarely got caught in the other direction. And my boss kept trying to buck me up and say, you can do this. I know you can do this if you just try a little harder. And now, all of a sudden, not only was it a math failing, it was like a moral failing that I wasn't trying. It was terrible. It was like one of the worst summers of my life. It would have been much kinder if she had just said, look, you are not cut out to be a bank teller, and you're giving away a lot of the bank's money. Like, why don't you go mow lawns this summer? I would have been way happier, and the bank would have been a little better off. So it's not only is it ineffective, it was not an act of kindness to keep bucking me up. I was never going to be good at that job. And it was also unfair to the other bank tellers who were very good at counting correct change out for people. Like, it wasn't fair to the bank. It was demoralizing for them that there was no punishment for my bad performance, right? So remember that it is not nice to just ignore poor performance. One of your jobs as a leader is to keep your top performers top of mind. And if you ask your top performers to carry somebody else's low performance, it's not nice to anybody. All right, so thought partner. Another common mistake that managers make is they think that they can just ignore their top performers. One of the people I coached said, that's crazy. That would be a little bit like saying a good recipe for a good marriage is to marry the right person and then never spend another minute with that person, right? It would be like me calling my husband and saying, hey, Andy, I'm not going to show up for the kid's birthday tomorrow because you're doing a great job raising them. I don't want to micromanage. That would not go over well with him or with the kids. I would not be welcome back. It's the same thing with your employees. You can't ignore them and expect to build a great relationship with them. It's not just about hiring the right people. You have to actually keep them top of mind. So one of the mistakes, though, is that people think, well, I don't want to micromanage, so I'm just going to become an absentee manager. So one of the things I would encourage you to do is just sort of build a simple graph in your mind about what's the difference between being a thought partner to somebody, being an absentee manager, and being a micromanager. Thought partners are curious. Absentee managers don't want to know. Micromanagers pretend like they know it all, right? Thought partners will ask about the relevant details. The absentee manager is detailophobic, right? They're terrified to know the details. And the micromanager is lost in the details, right? Thought partners will share context. One of the things that you have as a leader is a broader context. You know stuff more broadly. Usually the people working for you know stuff more deeply than you do, but you have a breadth of knowledge. Share that with them. The absentee manager is sort of unaware of context, and the micromanager, of course, hoards information. Don't do that. Don't do that to your people. Share the information that you have with them. Next, I want to talk for a minute about fair ratings and, and why it is that your rock stars often don't get good ratings. All too often at companies, the highest ratings, how many of you all give performance ratings in your, yeah, a lot of you. So and I think actually, even though there's a lot written about this, I think performance ratings are a good idea because they are what make your decisions about who gets promoted, who gets paid bonuses more transparent. So anyway, all too often the highest ratings go to the people who are in a superstar phase, who are on this, in a high growth trajectory phase of their careers, in order to build a case for promotion. What's the impact of that? The impact of that is that these people who are doing just as good work get lower ratings, and they're unhappy about it, naturally. They get the same ratings as the people who are doing kind of mediocre work, right? They're unhappy about that. It's not fair, especially when ratings have a bonus impact. And so they leave the company, or they get promoted sort of a la the Peter Principle promotion into a job that they're not, either they don't want or they're not good at, and they crumble, right? So don't do that. Don't do those things to your rock stars. Make sure that your performance ratings are a reflection of past performance over the past quarter or a half year or year, whatever the period is. The promotion is what's going to take care of future, but the performance rating should reflect past performance. Now I want to talk about career conversations. This is something you should do for everyone on your team. And career conversations are, for my money, the most fun thing you get to do as a manager, as a leader. These are not those unsatisfying conversations about why you're not getting promoted, right? That's not fun. Let me tell you how to avoid those career conversations that become just about the next promotion, and to have conversations that help people move a step in the direction of their dreams, right? Start, again, with everyone on your team once a year to have just sort of a life story conversation. The way that my co-founder, Russ Laraway, who developed this methodology, likes to start these conversations is, starting with kindergarten, tell me about your life, right? 45-minute conversation, not forever. This is so much more efficient way to get to know people than long, endless dinners that interrupt your family time, or taking everybody to go play go-kart or something. I mean, there's nothing wrong with dinner and go-karts, but you're going to get to know people so much more. Now, of course, you have to approach these conversations with some sensitivity. There are some people who would rather blow their brains out than talk to their boss about their childhood. And if you sense some discomfort, like, just back away. You know, there was one person who got in trouble because they sort of insisted that their employee tell him about his parents' divorce. The employee didn't want to talk about his parents' divorce with his manager. Like, you're not a shrink. Let's just be clear. This is just like a get to know you at a personal level. So it doesn't have to start with childhood necessarily, but most people are kind of happy to talk about their childhoods. And what you're trying to get out of this conversation is something very specific. What you want to do is you want to focus on pivots that the person made in their life and ask them about why they made those changes. And what you're going to deduce from that line of questioning is what the person cares about. What are the person's values? What does the person really care about in their work? So for example, if you were talking to somebody who had been a cheerleader and then quit cheerleading to become a swimmer, and asked this person why, this is a real conversation actually, asked this person why they made that change. This employee said that, well, cheerleading was fun and it was really social, but I didn't see the kind of improvement that I saw when I was in the pool every morning swimming and I saw my speed get better. And so this was a very results-oriented person. This person wanted to see the results of their work, right? As opposed to the person who was a swimmer and became a cheerleader because they really liked the team affect or whatever. But you're trying to figure out what motivates the person at work and in life, right? That's what you're trying to come up with. And you can even just write this down. You could jot down, cheerleader to swimmer, wants to see results of work. And then ask the person later, did I get that right? Maybe you got it wrong, maybe you misunderstood. And these stories, the reason why you want to talk about this, the reason why you don't want to just say, what motivates you at work, is that the richness of the story will give you a whole different description. There was one person who told the following story. Person, 12 years old, walking down Bourbon Street with her family, and her mother had just gone back to work. And her father was maybe a couple of milk punches into the walk down Bourbon Street, and they passed a strip joint. And the 12-year-old's head kind of looks in, sort of with horror, and her father holds her head there, staring in, this is the opposite of what you would think most fathers would do, and says, "You see that woman in there?" And the little girl says, "Yes." And he says to her, "That woman makes more every night than your mother does in a year." This woman was very motivated to be financially independent. But if all she had said to me was, "I want to be financially independent," I wouldn't have had nearly the same sympathy and, yes, I want you to be, I want you to be richer than whoever, Croesus. So if you get somebody's life story with these abstractions often don't mean much. If you don't get the life story with it. So take the time. It's more fun, anyway, to get to know people. So that's a life story. Next, you want to have a dreams conversation. And the reason why you want to have a dreams conversation, and not dreams, plural, is very important. Because very few of us know what we want to do when we grow up, right? And those of us who do, maybe it's 5% of the population, they confuse the heck out of the rest of us. Right? And so what you want to do is you want to ask somebody, not about, what do you want to do 5 years from now, but at the height of your career, when you have got everything you want, what does it look like? And lay out a few different dreams for me. And you're going to get a much richer conversation if you structure it that way. And you're going to avoid the conversation if all you say is, "What's your 5-year plan?" The person, even without meaning to, is very tempted to say, "Well, I want to be like you. I want your job." Russ, again, my co-founder, the first time he had one of these conversations and somebody came in and said, "Yeah, I think in 5 years I'd like to have a job like yours." And Russ said, "I'm not even sure I want this job. You're not thinking big enough. You want to know what people..." And when you really understand what people want, you'll be able to put them on the kinds of projects where all of a sudden their work will have meaning to them. Now, often when we trained managers to do this, they were very afraid that they were opening Pandora's box and that people were going to tell them that they really didn't love the job they had and they wanted something else. The truth is, most people don't want the job that they have right now forever. And you can either be part of the conversation or not part of the conversation. One of the women that we did this conversation with was working for Russ, selling ad serving technology. And one of her biggest dreams was to own and operate a spirulina farm. Now, it seemed like her current job has nothing to do with her dream, but it turned out that to own and operate a spirulina farm, she needed to learn how to get better at management. And this allowed Russ to structure the opportunities that she had so that she could learn how to be a great manager, so that the work she was doing today was connected to her long-term dream. So have the dreams conversation. And again, these are 2 45-minute conversations. This is not some sort of elaborate, endless process. The third conversation is a career action plan. What are the things that I, as your boss, can do for you to line up the work you're doing today with your long-term dream, right? So are there people I can introduce you to? Are there different projects I can put you on? Are there some trainings you can do? And now all of a sudden, people's work has a lot more meaning to them. And your work as the manager becomes way more meaningful as well. Because again, you're helping people take a step in the direction of their dreams. So those are some of the most important pieces of advice I have for you all to build a radically candid team. Thank you very much.